Next, we're going to welcome Dr. Richard Ellefritz. And the title of his presentation is State Crimes Against Democracy and Conspiracy Theories. Richard Ellefritz is an assistant professor of sociology at the University of the Bahamas. And during his doctoral program, he applied his area of concentration in social movements to the 9/11 truth movement. His ongoing research on movement-countermovement dynamics compares his interviews and ethnography research with the 9/11 truth movement to its counter-movement antagonists. His area of research specifically focuses on the roles of anti-conspiracy discourse in stigmatizing and silencing speech that raises troubling questions about historically significant events. And with that, we'd like to welcome to the stage this afternoon, Dr. Richard Ellefritz.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, honor to be here, especially with such hardworking colleagues. So today, I'll be discussing some material that goes along with my areas of research regarding conspiracy theories. This is drawing off the work of Dr. Lance DeHaven Smith. So just a little background about myself and how my interests arose around this specific area. I turned 18 soon after the events of September 11, 2001, and I largely bought into pretty much everything that I was told, even up to 2006 or 7, when I watched Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. I was somewhat disgusted with some of his insinuations. And then about a year later, I found out about the collapse of World Trade Center 7 in an internet documentary. And I was shocked at the fact that I had never heard of this before, because I was in my master's program at the time. I considered myself well-educated, well-informed. And the fact that I had never heard of it suggested to me that something was wrong with the official narrative of 9/11. And as I discovered from years of research with the 9/11 truth movement and researching their claims, I discovered that, they often say that World Trade Center 7 was never mentioned in the 9/11 Commission report. In fact, it was, but only in a footnote and not its collapse. So I was discussing this with just about everybody I could, and eventually, inevitably, I was called a conspiracy theorist, which was shocking to me because the closest I'd ever been to conspiracy theories was like the X-Files or Unsolved Mysteries up to that point. So I began my investigations into the nature of conspiracy theories from a sociological point of view, and eventually I decided to pursue my doctoral work studying the 9/11 truth movement. So this brought me up to eventually discovering Lance DeHaven Smith's work on the SCAD concept, which is an acronym for State Crimes Against Democracy. So there's a little bit to unpack there, but due to the limited time, I'll focus on some limited aspects of this. And one of the aspects that Dr. DeHaven Smith was dealing with is separating this concept of SCADs from the popular notion of conspiracy theories. So he was generating an academic style concept or construct to identify patterns in high crimes or just events that result in recreancy. So a couple months ago, I was a part of a panel at the Whistleblowers Summit, and I discussed some of these issues. So the link and reference is included in a bibliography that I'll make available to the audience that's associated with this presentation. But I discussed this idea of recreancy. So just going back to this definition of SCADs, what DeHaven Smith says is that they can be described as concerted actions or inactions by public officials that are intended to weaken or subvert popular control over their government. So he's not necessarily talking about a crime. So what recreancy is the loss of trust or the disabuse of trust in official positions, such as elected governments and what they are theoretically designed to do. Now, uh, this concept of scads was intended to provide academics and scholars with a way of getting around the already stigmatized label of conspiracy theorists. It's widely known and commonly accepted that this is a pejorative label. Some people try to say, well, it's just descriptive. We're just describing, a set of people who are socially deviant or abnormal because they have a worldview that's suspicious of authority, and so they look at every historical event from the paranoid notion that it must have been due to causes alternative to those of official explanations. So in my research, what I did was I focused on claims about World Trade Center 7 from the 9/11 Truth Movement and compared those to who I call the 9/11 Truth Movement's counter-movement antagonists. The label I use is 9/11 deniers, because their tactic is to just deny any type of empirical truth claim, even if it comes from a credentialed expert or professional in the relevant field, such as Stephen Jones, Niels Harrit, Richard Gage, Kevin Ryan, who have published in the areas related to the collapse of the World Trade Center towers. They'll just deny their claims, or they'll just outright ignore them. So these counter-movement antagonists really don't even consider the SCAD label to be valid in and of itself, because again, they're using the notion of behind the conspiracy label to just assume that there's some prior existing mental construct that defines the worldview of conspiracy theorists, rather than our claims to troubling anomalous empirical aspects of events in question, such as the collapse of World Trade Center 7. So as we can see on screen here, these section headings come directly from Dr. DeHaven Smith's own works that I've cited here. One thing that he doesn't do is discuss the conspiracy theory label from a sociological position, which is primarily what I'm concerned with. I'm not necessarily concerned with the aspects of the events in question, but rather the claims about those events. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We'll see a list of what Dr. DeHaven Smith notes as some of the known SCAD events. So we can see attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, the Iran-Contra affair, Florida's disputed presidential election, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, another attempted assassination, this time through the anthrax scare that's closely associated with 9/11, Iraq Gate, so the claims that were eventually proved to be false about WMD in Iraq, and then the disputed 2004 election. Now, I'll say, like, for example, just last night, the former president, Donald Trump, was making claims about an illegitimate election in 2020. His claims of that are routinely dismissed as conspiracy theory. Then he alleged his own conspiracy theory that the Democrats had constructed this Russia hoax, which there's evidence to suggest that there might have been some weight to that assertion. So I only bring this up because these issues are ongoing and involve celebrities, people with authority and power, up to our literally 10 hours ago. So these events, according to Dr. DeHaven Smith, are SCADs. These are known to be or suspected to be state crimes against democracy. However, you can go and look up the literature, and I've provided some of the references in my attached bibliography, that these same events and the others that are listed in Dr. DeHaven Smith's works are used as polling items and psychological indices to measure beliefs in conspiracy theories. So the people, groups, and organizations who are constructing and reifying the conspiracy theory label still use and continue to use what Dr. DeHaven Smith cites as SCAD events as signs and symptoms of beliefs in conspiracy theories. So we have these kind of two competing narratives or claims about the state of the world. And this is sort of emblematic of the way that conspiracy theories work in the universe of discourse, like what we talk about generally in terms of historically significant events. Are they just as the corporate media, public high school, and college level textbooks tell us that they are? Or is it possible that there are groups and organizations who seek to expand their wealth, power, and authority and are willing to manipulate mechanisms of democracy and undermine the public's trust in order to further their agendas? So those are kind of the two sides of the statement. So the SCAD concept is dealing with this idea of a crime against democracy. In the resources that I've noted, I'll say that in 2009, Chip Berlet came out with a monograph called Toxic to Democracy: Conspiracy Theories, Demonization, and Scapegoating. And he, along with others, say that no, it's conspiracy theories that are the threat to democracy. It's claimed that elites would commit crimes against democracy that are the threats against democracy themselves. A noted response by Peter Phillips and Mickey Huff actually includes DeHaven Smith's SCAD concept and points out something that I've seen routinely in the material produced by those who continue to erect the conspiracy theory label, that Chip Berlet uses the tactics of demonization and guilt by association in order to malign the character of people he labels conspiracy theorists. Another noted example of this is Cass Sunstein, who says in his work, Conspiracy Theories, Causes and Cures, that one reason why conspiracy theorists are almost always false is because we have a functioning media, journalist, press system that's requisite for a democratic order. And he, along with several others like Jonathan Kay, Michael Shermer, says that, well, if there were a conspiracy that actually happened, the media would report on it, such as in the cases of Watergate and Iran-Contra. So for these people, the only conspiracies that happen are those that become exposed. So in the world of Chip Berlet, Cass Sunstein, and others who believe that the corporate media, high school textbooks are largely correct in their assessment of reality, they only believe in failed conspiracies, because by definition, a successful conspiracy is one that is either never revealed or has a cover-up that constantly works in effect to conceal or continue to cover up the event. So I suggest reading David Ray Griffin's response, Cognitive Infiltration, to Sunstein. And by the way, Sunstein wrote a book called Conspiracy Theories and Other Dangerous Ideas. So it really is kind of a discursive battle line over the health of democracy, and it extends to issues of claims that conspiracy theorists will oppose climate change policies and vaccine policies, are more likely to commit crimes, including violent crimes. And so this is some of the these are some of the issues that are brought up when we look at a list of SCADs that Dr. DeHaven Smith points out. So on the one side are the adults in the room, the rational analysts who are trying to protect the rest of society from the irrational, unruly children. And on the other side are people who look at historical events, see what they suspect to be anomalies, pursue their own investigation, join communities of inquiry, and and basically are labeled conspiracy theorists for their troubles. So if we can go to the next slide. One of the things that Lance DeHaven Smith does is he talks about this conspiracy theory label. So an article that he didn't cite in his research, which I thought would have been useful, is a sociology article called Dangerous Machinery, Conspiracy Theorists as a Transpersonal Strategy of Exclusion. So the graph that we see is very similar to a graph that Lance DeHaven Smith uses in his book, Conspiracy Theories in America, as well as in another book that we'll see here in a minute. But this was an assessment of the use of the conspiracy theorist label in New York Times articles. They also, the authors of this article, Gina Husting and Martin Orr, also analyzed academic texts. And basically their conclusion is that the conspiracy theory label reflexively refrains an interaction, challenges the legitimacy of claims or claimants, and allows its user to avoid addressing the claims themselves. It shifts discourse from claimants' manifest content to the right to be taken seriously. So in large part, it's all about the ability for people to ridicule and stigmatize individuals and groups through the conspiracy theory label. So there's a book written on this by Katharina Thalmann very recently called The Stigmatization of Conspiracy Theory Since the 1950s. So you notice that the graph here starts in 1968, and so do the other graphs, because really before 1968, the mid-1960s, the term wasn't widely used in the popular press, and certainly not the academic press. So here, Lance DeHaven Smith is directly targeted with an assertion. Lance DeHaven Smith has observed the increasingly negative connotation and increasing usage of the term conspiracy theory since the 1960s, but has falsely suggested, not just in his book, but also as a guest on the Alex Jones show, that the term was introduced by the CIA to counter conspiracy theories, specifically those about the Kennedy assassination. And as Andrew somebody has shown, however, the compound conspiracy theory was first used in the late 19th century. So this is not the only place that we'll see this. Now, that book is fairly good in part, and that it does a good historical job, but there's all these connotations, such as including the fact that Lance DeHaven Smith was the guest on the Alex Jones show. As the first image that I showed, he was also a guest on C-SPAN. So why choose the Alex Jones show? It's just a way of maligning his character. If we can go to the next slide, please. So here is another example. Now, I'm perfectly happy to share my slides so that people can read these pages that I've screenshotted out of this book. This author is a very active, quote unquote, debunker. He's actually personally taken issue with my use of the 9/11 denier label. But he wrote this book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, ostensibly as a how-to book on debunking conspiracy theories using facts, logic, and respect. Now, these 3 pages that I've included here, if anybody wants them, they can read them for themselves. They're directly targeted at Lance DeHaven Smith. But he starts his book off by saying, look, I'm just using conspiracy theory as a way of describing people. So he says, I'm quoting from his book, just the first page. Conspiracy theorist is being simply defined as a person who believes a conspiracy theory. This is a perfectly reasonable definition that fits with what 9/11 truthers believe, or what JFK conspiracists believe, and what chemtrailers, moon landing hoaxers, Sandy Hook false flaggers, and alien-based cover-uppers all believe. They think that there was a secret plot behind something and or that there's been a secret cover-up of something. So I don't know what your definition of respect is, but I don't feel respect as a person who can easily be labeled a 9/11 truther by being lumped in with these other pejorative labels ending with ER. So he says, the average person who simply thinks that the CIA assassinated JFK sees himself as a reasonable person and does not want to be associated with the odd people who think the Queen is a shape-shifting lizard. Similarly, the 9/11 truther does not want to be thought of as a tinfoil hatter. He goes on to say, that reason is itself a conspiracy theory. The theory that the term conspiracy theory was invented in 1967 by the CIA to discredit conspiracy theorists. I go on with quotes from the book. One of the main promoters of this theory is Dr. Lance DeHaven Smith. DeHaven Smith admits that the document that the CIA put out, so this is a dispatch memo uh, what is it, 1037-960, the author says, DeHaven-Smith admits that the document itself does not actually explicitly encourage usage of the term, and to get around this, he embarks on a series of interpretive mental gymnastics attempting to determine the hidden meaning in the CIA document. Yeah, trained scholars and academics oftentimes look for, read between the lines, unmask, unpack the latent content of texts. But apparently for a person who is attempting to debunk conspiracy theories through respect, this is a series of mental gymnastics that a credentialed, noted, published author and scholar takes. So going on from the book, while DeHaven-Smith claims that the conspiracy theory label was, quote, put in place in 1967 by the CIA, in fact, the term had been used for decades before that. So that's exactly what we saw from the book about the stigmatization of conspiracy theories from the 1950s, is this sort of way of dismissing statements by saying, well, no, because you didn't exactly say everything 100% perfectly, and there's one instance I can cherry pick as an example that refutes what you said, therefore you're wrong. And I've seen this over and over again in my research, and and if we can go to the next slide. And one of the people who brings this out, his name is Matthew Dentith, a philosopher from New Zealand. I believe he's working out of China somewhere now. If I were going to suggest a reading for anybody listening today, it would be this book, Taking Conspiracy Theories Seriously. And it's actually a lot of Dentith's work that I provided in the attached bibliography that I would recommend as well for helping to clarify thinking about the nature of conspiracy theories from more of an academic or scholarly point of view. So what I have here on screen is a snippet of one of his articles, he and Lee Basham, called Social Sciences Conspiracy Theory Panic. Now they want to cure everyone. Remember, I noted Cass Sunstein's article, Conspiracy Theories, Causes and Cures. So this idea of cure is actually kind of prominent within the anti-conspiracy discourse literature. So there's a 2013 article by John Bonas and Gregory Miller called Inducing Resistance to Conspiracy Theory Propaganda, Testing Inoculation and Meta-Inoculation Strategies. That's what's called pre-bunking these days. There's another one by Daniel Jolie and Karen Douglas called Prevention is Better Than Cure, Addressing Anti-Vaccine Conspiracy Theories. So there's actually a long, a sizable body of literature about curing beliefs in these ostensibly harmful or dangerous ideas that threaten democracy. So what we have here listed are authors of two articles. The top one is a response to the bottom one. So Dentith et al. Are responding to Gerald Bronner et al. And notice that Karen Douglas is a part of that group. So her name will come up again in my final slide. But here represented are kind of two divergent viewpoints or worldviews. What I really think are two different paradigms regarding the nature of conspiracy theories. The idea expressed in the top passage starts out with, governments and corporations routinely conspire to deceive people. This is no startling revelation to anyone who is historically or politically literate. Therefore, we should be, and I'm now inserting myself, therefore, we should be on the lookout for scads, because if a SCAD is potentially in action, we can help to remedy some threats to self-government or popular rule. However, the article that they're responding to starts out with a plea that the Ministry of Education must test its pedagogical tools against conspiracy culture. The wrong cure might only serve to spread the disease. So they have this disease model that we are epistemologically crippled, or we have these sort of damaged belief systems that have a virulent meme anti-authoritarianism, of what they call a monological belief system, where we think that if there's a big historical event, it must have a big explanation to it, and a host of other ways of explaining away empirical claims about anomalous events or occurrences in historically significant events. So, in order to explain those away, they just say, well, we just have errant beliefs about those events in a number of problematic ways. So, if we can go to the last slide, these are screenshots from two different organizations, and I bring them to our attention because it's not that there's just a few groups of academics who are in their departments and they're writing papers together and citing each other and building this little cottage industry of academic papers. These screenshots are actually from two different organizations. One of them is Crest Research, headed by Karen Douglas with her team that she usually writes with, Robbie Sutton, and Joseph Ushinsky, who's a big name in the anti-conspiracy discourse world. The bottom one is from COST's Compact Group, so the comparative analysis of conspiracy theories. So you can see in the top one, it's this sort of way of, again, maligning people with, well, if you believe that the Twin Towers were demolished through insider practices rather than outside forces like Al Qaeda, then you probably believe in, that Queen Elizabeth is a reptile. So these are tropes used to malign the character of people collectively who can be associated all together or pooled in all together under this sort of widely cast net. And in the bottom one, I included this description because I want to show that there is an organized, funded, concerted effort to undermine individuals' ability to think about and question and publicly discuss competing narratives to those of officialdom. And what I mean by that are the mutually reinforcing structures of government, corporate news operations, popular press, journalists, and academics who cite each other and support each other in combating people who question things like, how could a 47-story steel skyscraper collapse suddenly, symmetrically, universally at free fall acceleration on September 11, 2001, without being hit by a plane? And why were there news reports of its collapse before it collapsed? And then the government took, through the agency of NIST, 7 years to come up with what they said was a new phenomenon. So these organizations here are actively seeking to delimit the ability for people to think about, to question, to talk about, and certainly to raise legitimate questions or legitimated questions in public discourse about historically significant events. So again, if anybody wants these slides, I'm more than happy to send them out along with the bibliography. Everything is linked to and sourced. And with that, I will hand over the baton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Richard Ellefritz. Just one question, and you answered, I had some other questions prepared, but you answered them pretty handedly in the latter part of your presentation. But you talked about this sort of clique, this self-referential clique, dare I say, incestuous in academia, referencing each other, creating a kind of self-referencing kind of cottage industry, as you put it. It seems to me, Richard, that this is running parallel, this issue in academia, which is very important and certainly a central focus of this symposium today, but this is also running parallel to the same thing happening in the mainstream press or the Fourth Estate, as it used to be known. And so my question is, you pointed out there is a very well-funded effort on the academic side and what you called the anti-conspiracy discourse. And so would you equate this with a type of active measures by the government? Because certainly the funding has to be coming from somewhere, either government or foundations? You know, have you thought much about what's driving this behind the scenes? What's the mechanism creating these two problems running parallel in academia and the media?
Sure. And, there's a couple of ways that I can answer that. One is, stochasticism. Everything is just random, happens by chance. People just need to pad their resumes. They need to be a part of organizations and committees and get publications. They want to generate income, keep their jobs, and therefore they write off for grants. And because the popular discourse in society, just randomly, stochastically on its own, is one of supporting anti-conspiracy discourse. The people in government who are approving grants, they probably believe the same thing, and therefore, they fund research that seems to fit the dominant social paradigms that academics are interested in. There's no motive, there's no conspiracy. Then, one step removed from that is this idea that they want to protect society from the dangerous beliefs being espoused by people who threaten democracy, they threaten the climate, they threaten public health, and so on and so forth. And so they've generated these ideas that there are real existential threats being generated by conspiracy theorists. Now, lastly, I'll say that the whole issue with the CIA memo under question, is it 1035-960? Goes back to this idea that, well, perhaps there was an organized, concerted effort to encourage media and academics to start using the conspiracy theory label in logic. And I'll just note that in the bibliography that I have on the top of, I believe, page 3, I cite this article by Tom Bethel called "The Quote Circuit" that appeared in the Washington Monthly. Then that sort of newspaper article was then used in an academic article by Clark Macaulay and Susan Jacques in 1979 to generate this idea that big events necessitate big causes in the conspiracy theory world. And then that was taken on by an academic, Karen Sternheimer, to teach sociology students that questioning the Warren Report and the 9/11 Commission Report was just faulty psychological circuitry, and that people naturally want to explain big events by big causes. So those are just some examples of the fact that, well, it seems to be the case that first a newspaper article, then a journal article, and now, sort of popular educational press are all self-reinforcing each other in a way that seems to support what the CIA was saying, which was that they needed to stop people from questioning the Warren Commission report. Now, it's well known that the majority of the public, in the United States at least, the majority of the public, anywhere from 60 to 80%, depending on how you ask it, doesn't believe the Warren Commission report. I just helped to fund a national poll done in the United States asking questions about the 9/11, the events of 9/11. A solid quarter of American US adults do not believe the official story. Now, even though that the majority of those respondents didn't know that there was a 9/11 grand jury, a strong majority, somewhere like 60%, want a new investigation or would support a new investigation. So it left up to people, for whatever motive, whether it's they want their income, their job, or they're protecting society, left up to them, right? The majority of people in the United States who want a new investigation in 9/11 should be off limits from asking those questions or seeking that type of public inquiry. As I think we heard from our previous speaker, there are still family members of the victims of 9/11 who are seeking out a response to questions that are still unanswered.
Yes, and I might add to the latest iteration in recent years is the term fake news and the fact checkers that have emerged, sponsored by some of the mainstream media outlets, but also from foundations as well. This is also
Can I
being
speak to
used.
that real quick?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
One thing about that, the organizations that I cited at the end, Crest and Cost, are the ones who are generating the anti-conspiracy literature used by journalists and academics and others. And you'll see that there's a parallel between what they promote and then what you see the fact checkers promote, and then bloggers and vloggers and therefore and people promote. And my question for this whole thing is, if social media stopped the ability for people to publicly discuss the origins of COVID in the early months, and then later said, oh, well, now it's being taken seriously by serious people, then how do we trust what is being censored now? First of all, how do we trust the people who are censoring it? And what other issues are being censored that the public wants to talk about, however much of a minority they might be? But it really calls into question this fact checking, especially with the knowledge that there are organizations putting out the literature to teach those people how to combat the quote unquote conspiracy theories.
Well, and I might add and throw this back to you. I know we're going slightly over time here. We'll take a break before our next session in a moment. But I'm going to ask you this for a brief answer, Richard. If there was another major geopolitical false flag event, another 9/11 event, which happened now, what do you think the effect would be with all of these new tools we have, these fact checker brigades, and the way the system is really pinned down? Everybody is basically all gathered onto a handful of major Silicon Valley monopolistic platforms, as opposed to 2001. How would it be different today? Would it be more difficult to get to truth or to ask questions now? How do you envision this?
I'll give you a clear example that just happened to see last night. The former president of the United States was on a stage in Iowa telling tens of thousands of his supporters in a lengthy 10-minute diatribe that he believes the election was stolen, to mass applause by them. And then he looks out and says, I bet the cameras are off. And I wonder, if I went and checked the mainstream media, if they're covering that and how they're covering it. If they're saying it's a big lie, there's no evidence. Because I'm still curious about whether or not there are investigative journalists who have gone out and systematically reviewed the actual claims that are being made. Or are they following the pattern that I noted in my own research, where they don't directly investigate the actual empirical claims, but rather use all these dismissal terms to say, no, there's no evidence for that, you're just a conspiracy theorist. So we're seeing that right now with with what people are claiming to be an actual sort of inside job. And a lot of those same people were the ones who were talking about the Wuhan lab leak theories that were being censored. And now they believe that big tech is in on the cover up. So I don't need to theorize. Like I've seen this. There's plenty of empirical examples. And I'll just end on this. What I'm seeing is a growing schism or divide in the two cultures that are, on the one hand, wanting to publicly interrogate troubling issues that they have with what they're being told, and on the other side, people who largely support the corporate state, media, academic apparatus, who are constructing the dominant narrative of our times.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Richard Ellefritz. That was a very thought-provoking presentation, to say the least. And I encourage people, again, for all of our presenters afterwards, in the show notes, there will be references to their presentation, so you'll be able to follow up on that. We're going to take a short intermission, and we're going to be returning for our next session, which will be led off by Dr. Piers Robinson. We will see you in just a few moments.